Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this event of Eurac Research, to the event entitled Ukraine's Societal Resilience, Progress and Challenges in Times of War. My name is Elisabeth Alber. I work here at Eurac Research at the Institute for Comparative Federalism, which basically organized this event in cooperation with the University of Tartu and the Ukraine Center of the University of Tartu, and additionally also the Eurac Research Ukraine Task Force. So let me just give you a bit of a frame with regard to this cooperation. First of all, Eurac Research Consulting is active since the 90s with regard to consulting in different areas, including human rights, minority rights, decentralization reforms, democratization, and so on. And this also then in recent years obviously inclined us to pool forces together and to create what is called the Eurac Research Ukraine Task Force. And this task force lately has been signing up 2 framework contracts with the Council of Europe, for example, for consultancies in the fields of media pluralism, multilingualism, decentralization reforms, and also consultancies in issues like minority protection and legislation when it comes to minority protection and diversity accommodation. Also, we will be pleased as a Eurac Research Ukraine Task Force to welcome a delegation in May 2025 on the issues of green recovery. This will be in cooperation with the United Nations Environment Programme and the Carpathian Convention. And it will also tackle the issues of energy resilience. Today, instead, we are here to talk about societal resilience, and this is obviously ever more important with all the news we are reading and hearing exactly in these days with regard to what is going on in case of possible negotiations, in case of ceasefires, and so on and so forth. I am very happy, and Eurac Research is very happy to have for this event an expert with us. So I introduce you Dr. Oleksii Kolesnykov. He's Ukrainian. He's working right now at the University of Tartu. He has been a lecturer and a researcher in various universities in Estonia, especially lately, and earlier also obviously in Ukraine, where he was also a policy analyst and he was heading the Association for Community Self-Organization Assistance, a leading Ukrainian think tank that focused a lot on local governance and actually really compiled data when it comes to local government and governance. He is active and has been active in different capacities also with regards to European integration issues, and basically as a worker in the office of the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine for European and Euro-Atlantic integration issues, and many more functions. I leave it here, and I leave the floor to Oleksii, who will kindly share with us all his insights, professional and also personal backgrounds with regard to Ukraine's societal resilience, Ukraine's capacity to endure and resist aggression, how actually local communities and communities in general can withstand and adapt to crises. And I just make a communication that the event is recorded, so for you to know that the event is recorded, and in case there is an issue with it, please approach us. Thank you so much, Oleksii, in advance, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elisabeth. I would like today to present you, probably it's not a paper, it's not one research, it's a mix of some parallel researchers which are in progress and some findings from these researchers outlining some issues of Ukrainian societal resilience. For this presentation, I have chosen this picture, which you can see, if translated from Ukrainian, it can be translated like, how are you? I hold on. But it refers to this kitchen cabinet, which you see, which is a real photo from liberated Borodyanka, a small city near Kiev. It was a house which was almost totally destroyed, so there are no walls, but this cabinet continues hanging there. And over this cabinet, there is also a ceramic rooster. Both altogether, they became as one of the symbols of Ukrainian resilience at the first months of full-scale invasion. First of all, I would like to clarify some basic concepts here. First of all, concept of resilience and societal resilience, because actually there are different approaches how to define these concepts. But I follow a so-called socio-ecological approach, which defines resilience as the capacity for adaptation, learning, self-organization, and the general ability to recover from disturbance. Very important word here is adaptation, because some other approaches, they first of all highlight ability to recover, but I think that when it comes to resilience, we also need to talk about transformations, some adaptive transformations, which make the relevant unit more resilient even for future crises. And therefore, I use this kind of quite complicated definition of societal resilience, which I borrowed from the Relevant Institute at the Free University of Amsterdam. I will talk about probably two aspects, two domains of resilience, because actually societal resilience is a very comprehensive concept. There are many elements of it, but as political scientist, I will probably focus on two most important for me, so social domain and probably political domain. So we can split them like this, and first part of presentation will be about social dimension, and second about political institutions and their functioning during wartime. I was trying to, when working on this research, I was trying to find out where is the rooting of Ukrainian societal resilience, and first of all at the level of communities, at community level, at the level of people, because from the very beginning it was clear that Ukraine managed to resist, first of all, due to bottom-up initiative, not due to the activity of the state, because state demonstrated in quite many cases that it was totally unready for this full-scale invasion, though it was obvious that it will happen in this or other format. And that's why I was seeking, first of all, some roots, social roots. And here, first, such kind of preliminary finding is that generally Ukrainians are very adaptive nation, and it is confirmed by many social research on migration studies, on other studies, and generally used to live under crises. Frankly speaking, all modern history in Ukraine and beyond, it's a total polycrisis, where people used to live. And that's why it actually contributed to this societal resilience quite significantly. But at the same time, what on my mind makes Ukrainians different, for instance, from Russians or neighboring Belarusian nation, is that they are generally in critical situations. Ukrainians are proactive, and they tend to act and not to expect for help. Why? Because probably they very rarely received it from the state. That's why they act, but in specific manner, using some kind of horizontal relations and ties. And here comes another very important feature, that Ukrainians generally maintain solid horizontal ties, however, primarily with people from the relatively close circle. It can confirm by many facts. First of all, that generally, if you take different public opinion polls from different years, you will find that traditionally the level of trust to political institutions, to the state institutions, is low, and trust to NGOs, people, and so on and so forth is much higher. And it was always like this during all years of independence. Besides, the important feature is that the Ukrainians are spiritually linked to to the place of residence and used to have a very strong local identity. It is not so strong now. Now we clearly see that citizen identity, so identification yourself with nation, Ukrainian nation, dominates, prevails, but at some point, around 40% of citizens had more strong local identity than citizen identity. That means then answering to the question, whom do you consider yourself first of all? Many Ukrainians, first of all, consider themselves as residents of relevant community, where they live, or settlement, and only identification with nation was on the second and the third place, actually. Now, this is not observed, actually, and over 80% actually clearly identified themselves with nation, but at some point it was very strong. And one mental feature of national mentality, which is also confirmed by many researchers who work on this, is a cult of home and family. So if Ukrainians really consider something valuable, first of all, this is their family and their home. So very close circle around. But at the same time, the close circle of average Ukrainian is not so close, actually. Usually it's quite large, and it engages relatives. Families are very often quite big, friends, colleagues, etc. So usually this close circle is quite extensive, and it actually also facilitates establishment of strong horizontal ties. Very important thing, vibrant civil society. Let's be true, civil society was particularly engaged in two revolutions, which happened during 10 years, and leaded these revolutions, and actually twice returned the country to the democratic track when it tried to go somewhere away from it. And it, frankly speaking, was enough developed. There are a lot of different NGOs which are capable, and they existed actually already at the stage of when the full-scale invasion started. But at the same time, very powerful and real and precedent volunteer movement has raised during this hybrid phase of invasion. So starting from 2014, when the state was very weak after revolution, and actually these volunteers, they saved the army, they supplied it with necessary things, and it was very important that Ukraine could resist this hybrid form of aggression in 2014. And since the full-scale invasion, it has just blossomed, frankly speaking. And you can see here some numbers about how many, so €1.5 billion has been collected by only three biggest foundations during these 3 years. But there are a lot of different, so it's just impossible to count how much money is collected, because most of them are collected but on private cards. And only registered volunteers have collected in 2024 around a bit less, 1 billion euro. But how many other unofficial donations have been collected, only God knows, actually, or even God doesn't know. And of course, during this full-scale invasion, there has been established new donation culture, because previously in Ukraine, philanthropy was a domain of business, of large business. Now it is the business of any citizen. So, and this culture that there are no small donations, every donation matter. It became a part of culture of Ukrainians, and those people who do not donate, they are considered freaks, actually. And you can see also the numbers, how many people donate to the army until today. Yes, of course, the average donation has decreased because for economical reasons, but still 60% do it regularly, and 44 declare that they do it from every salary, actually. 2022, 2023 were the years when Ukrainians demonstrated the highest level of unity and social cohesion ever. Because previously, Ukrainian society is a typical pluralistic society, as it, if we refer to Arendt Leibhardt and how he understands this. Yeah? So with different views on the future of the country, on which were with these regional cleavages and so on and so forth. But first time in Ukraine's history during war, we received this type of consensus on basic things, actually. You can see the numbers. They are approximate and they systemize several public opinion polls. So I just rounded them for better understanding. But still, we never had such kind of cohesion, because even integration to NATO in 2022 was not supported by the most of the citizens. Or, for instance, democracy as a preferred model of governance was not supported by more than 50%. Yeah? So it was a really important thing that this level of cohesion inside the very pluralistic and divided society was achieved. However, in 2024, we have some opposite trends, so please pay attention to the red figures. But at the same time, we have growth in some others, and no general dynamics and high indicators in some others. Yeah, but we have some decrease regarding the perception of the general course of events in the country, trust to the president, which decreased seriously, and belief in victory, which slightly also decreased. Very important thing is Kordocentrism of Ukrainians, which is considered a feature of national mentality as well. So I here refer to Alexander Kulchitsky, who is originally Ukrainian but made his career in France. He is an academic researcher and he studied Ukrainian mentality, and he introduced this concept of Kordocentrism, which means heart-centered worldview. What did he mean by this concept? He described that Ukrainians generally are rational, quite rational in worldview, in perception of the surrounding, in taking decisions. But at the same time, emotional component is very important for them. And they, anyway, when considering something rationally, they need also to feel, not only to assess the arguments. And feeling is very important. That's why, electoral campaigns, for instance, this emotional campaign is very significant. And you probably will not win any election in Ukraine if you're a very good candidate, but people do not feel with your spiritual link. Yeah? And this is very important here, because for Ukrainians to be resilient, it's very important to believe in something. And during this especially difficult first months of invasion, A lot of such myths appeared, like Ghost of Kiev, which a lot of people really believed that this heroic fighter jet pilot, but then appears that he doesn't exist actually, or some other myths which were supporting the nation during this conflict. And also very important thing that during war, our social researchers, they see the tendency that though Ukrainians are fatalists, yeah, during war this started decreasing significantly, and only 27% consider events as fatum-driven, yeah. But most of people rely on themselves. And two very important issues also, Ukrainians break the rules. I had few discussions with colleagues from the winter school, and they were surprised when I told them that we usually ignore air raid alerts now. So only when it is something starts exploding close, then we run to the shelter. But usually, and they say, why? Why do you do this? And I have only one explanation, because you then do not live your life. I can say it from my experience, because if I take serious each air raid alert, I cannot work, I cannot sleep. No, you just can get crazy very quickly, yeah, with this. And ignoring, but rational ignoring, so following what's going on in internet, there are applications, there is Telegram, it helps. It's a tool for survival, a strategy for survival as well. But for Ukrainians, it's very easy, because they usually are quite an anarchic nation. And sometimes they express very reckless bravery, and I have a very short video to illustrate this. This is from the first days of invasion. This guy is carrying a mine, real mine, smoking at the same time, just carrying it out of the road. Yeah, so these types of bravery were very often demonstrated, and they are rooted here, actually, in breaking the rules and reckless bravery. Ukrainians are also quite inventive, creative, and try to perceive difficulties with humor. You have probably heard about these Russian warships and so on, a lot of memes, a lot of humor around, which really supported the nation during the most difficult months. But one thing you probably didn't hear. So the question is, what did Ukrainians do when there was a real threat of nuclear attack in September 2022? Because Putin was quite serious, and then further interviews of Joe Biden, they confirmed that he was even ready to attack with tactical nuclear weapon. And I can say that here is my wife in this audience, and she actually, we both had at this time even some storage with food, with water, and even these pills which we had to take in case of, so we're getting ready for this. But what did Ukrainians do publicly in this regard? Have anybody heard? They were organizing orgy. Skytte case, so-called. So there is a hill in the center of Kiev, Skytte. And at some point in the Telegram channel, and one of the Telegram channel appeared an initiative that in case of nuclear attack, we have nothing to do. Let's just gather at this Skytte and enjoy. Yes, last minutes of our life. And it was supported by many celebrities, by many this topic got viral, yeah, and it actually switched attention during this quite difficult period. And this meme is one of the famous from this initiative. If translated, it says, when you registered for an orgy and wait for a nuclear war. Yeah, so it's one of the memes which was very actively used in this initiative. These are probably the main points about the roots of the social roots of societal resilience. And here I would like to switch to maybe political dimension, and first of all, just remind some previous research on what's going on in Ukraine in terms of democratization. So Ukraine definitely during these 30 years passed from through the way of developments and fails in terms of democratization, making two steps forward, one back, two steps forward, one back. But generally, there is consensus among the researchers that what didn't happen in Ukraine, there never happened democratic consolidation. And it remained in the stage of hybrid regime, and Ukrainian political regime was by all researchers generally qualified as hybrid. Depending on theoretical framework, different terms were used, but I'm more dedicated to the so-called neo-patrimonial theory, which, as for me, explains a lot of processes in hybrid regimes. And here you can see some main features of patronal democracy or patrimonial state. Different terms are used regarding Ukraine, which were, but by which we can characterize Ukrainian political system and political regime. And here I also would refer to one of the most dedicated professors who uses this theory and researchers on Ukrainian political regime, Alexander Fisun, who is the head of Department of Political Science in Kharkiv University. And he actually describes all the dynamics in two phases. Yeah? So all dynamics starting from 1991 till the war, actually. He shows that it is a change of two phases. So one was authoritarian bureaucratic, where the president was able to take more power in the country, and so-called competitive democratic, when the president was forced to share power with some other forces because it was a result of elections. But generally, within all these phases, Ukraine never managed to go out of this logic and go to move towards democratic consolidation and liberal democracy model. So in my research, I try also to change whether it happens now, actually, during war. And if not, then how it develops within this framework. If yes, what kind of features can be evident, can serve an evidence that Ukraine moves there. And I would like to describe some maybe trends of political development in Ukraine during wartime, particularly full-scale invasion. First of all, I will describe these trends, and I qualify them as democratic trends, non-democratic trends, and controversial trends, which have both democratic features, features of democratization, and features of democratic backsliding. First of all, let's stop on the fact that Ukraine, on my view, and according to my research, has generally maintained political pluralism, freedom of expression, association, and even of peaceful assembling during full-scale invasion. First of all, what was important that political opposition remained fully operational and is represented in the parliament by several parties. Though there were some attempts to make pressure on oppositional forces, generally it remains operational. And opposition was not banned or something like this, no censorship was introduced and so on. Censorship is generally, political censorship is directly prohibited by Ukrainian constitution. Yes, there were introduced new restrictions on the activity of the pro-Russian parties and NGOs, but generally all these restrictions were established by law, necessary and proportional, and therefore I consider them not as a breaking the principle of freedom of political expression, but rather as a necessary measure during severe crises. I can elaborate on this a bit more, maybe there will be questions. We'll not stop here. And what's important that in Ukraine, peaceful assemblies still today are possible, and in most cases they are allowed, though martial law allows to limit them quite seriously. But at the same time, you can gather peacefully, in most cases. Second very important trend, which I find generally also democratic with some controversialities, maintain freedom of speech with no media censorship. And it was also very important because it positively affected government transparency and accountability in the country. But how it became possible? It became possible due to fundamental shifts in the media landscape which happened during wartime. Because on one hand, most of Ukrainian channels, TV channels, so all major TV channels, were united in so-called national teleton. So they are now financed from the state, not from the private sources. And they work like 24/7, giving only official information. But at the same time, they do not give official information only. Each of the channels has its own editor policy. It is possible to buy time there because my NGO purchased their time and they covered our activities with no censorship, actually, no problems with this. So even this tool, though it is concentrated under state umbrella, cannot be considered as a monopoly of the state on the information space. But at the same time, what was important that in Ukraine during this time happened total shift to online media, which never was observed previously, actually. And now, first of all, it was triumph of Telegram. I describe it like this because 2/3 of Ukrainians consume news now from Telegram channels. It is good and bad at the same time because it's not, there is no control what kind of information is there. But it is more rapid in informing. And why it happened? We started from following air raid alerts there, where the missiles fly, actually, because some Telegram channels posted this information very quickly. And it was useful. And then people following this issue, they actually started reading news there. And also social media, first of all, first time in Ukraine's history, surpassed actually television in popularity with a share of 75%. Due to all shifts, Ukraine now has real freedom of speech, actually, which is a part of political regime. Yeah, so no censorship has been introduced during war. Controversial trend, re-oligarchization. Because this oligarchic system is the base of neo-patrimonial politics. And actually, it's not impossible to switch to a liberal democracy model with destroying this system. And the war actually gives very nice preconditions for this, because oligarchs lose assets. They lost a lot, actually. And thus they lose impact. But at the same time, Ukraine demonstrates that there is no policy how to dismantle this system totally. So there is no political strategy how to destroy it. And at the same time, we have a situation where there are bad oligarchs, like Kolesnykov became, and good oligarchs who support army, who supply army, and so on and so forth, like Rinat Akhmetov, who in 2021 was the biggest critic of his TV channels, were the biggest critics of Zelensky's regime. Now he appeared to be good. And taking that recovery processes might deal with quite big money, I'm afraid that without the strategy of the oligarchization, we can finally face re-oligarchization, when some people will benefit from recovery processes and make new big capitals and receive, once again, big impact on politics. So this trend is very controversial. The trend which is very close to the topic of what is actually researched in Eurac and the topic of the winter school, the shift of authority towards president and his office, which happened in Ukraine, but it was not caused by the emergency measures, not so much caused by emergency measures, but rather was a result of political landscape. Because if you look to the 2019, a composition of parliament elected there, so who were these people? No one. There were no names. Members of parliament who came through with Zelensky party would never become members of parliament if they do not use the brand of Zelensky at this point. So they didn't have any background and so on and so forth. So it is the result of this landscape, but during war, the office of president, it was the issue always in Ukraine that president exercised more power than prescribed by constitution. But now it is especially clearly observed. And the question is even not the president's power, but the power of his office, which is not a constitutional body, or the power of the Council on Security, which is advisory body which now takes a lot of decisions in the country. For instance, regarding sanctions, personal sanctions. And here, of course, the figure of Andriy Yermak probably is well known even here, the head of the office, but here are very two illustrative pictures. On the top, you can see Sirato, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Hungary, Andriy Yermak, and somewhere there is a Ukrainian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and you can see who is negotiating actually. So the minister sits somewhere there and keeps silence. And the second one, it's the summit in Switzerland, the peace summit so-called. And here you can see also on this photo, there are leaders. There are no heads of their administrations on this photo, but there is Andriy Yermak, and somewhere behind there is Kamala Harris, yeah, who is, at this point, she is vice president. So these two photos actually demonstrate very well the role which the head of the president's office has. And generally, this shift of authority, as for me, the shift of authority to the government, to the executive, yeah, during crisis, is generally fine, yeah, with the constitutional model because it is constitutional body. But the shift towards president's office looks like abuse of power, slightly. And this is important non-democratic trend in the country which we face. And when the role of parliament and government is gradually leveling, because last changes in the government, they looked just funny, yeah, and were called by Ukrainians as shifting beds in Brussels, because actually the president announced which ministers will be replaced, how it will be going, so he communicates on this issue. Sorry, President of Ukraine is not the head of executive branch, yeah, according to the constitution. And here we have an issue. Probably one of the most discussable topics, and I'm pretty sure there will be questions about this, no voting. So elections are postponed, and they can be postponed from the point of view Ukrainian legislation, but this postponement, relevant constitutional provisions are not enough precise, let's say it like this. And that's why it leaves room for some misuse. Yeah? So if constitution is more precise in this regard, it would be much better. But at the same time, I have a lot of arguments, probably we'll discuss this later, that Ukraine is not able to conduct democratic elections for many practical reasons until active hostilities are going. And if these elections are conducted, it will be only worse for Ukraine to do this. But of course, this has a lot of negative impacts. And first of all, negatively impacts just party politics is totally erased in the country. Of course, as a result, it has incompetent governance, because country really needs reloading the authorities, but cannot do it. And what's also interesting, and I don't know why it is not discussed in Ukraine at all, but in March 2022, there was adopted even not law, but just cabinet minister's decree, which doesn't allow registering authorities to accept applications for the registration of new political parties. And as a result, it's not possible to establish a new political party. So all new political projects will probably be based on already based political parties, which will be just sold and bought. Yeah, but it's a very strange limitation, which I couldn't find the ground in the country why it exists, actually. A few words about local self-government. 5 years ago, I was happy to share with you here some promising results of Ukrainian decentralization. And now I can say that it was one of the key factors which contributed capabilities of local self-government to cope with many wartime challenges. Of course, I do not talk about security, but with internally displaced persons, with support of the army, and so on and so forth. Generally, only in 13% of municipalities, instead of local self-government bodies, there were introduced temporary state administrations, but these all communities, most of them, actually not all, but most of them are occupied or on the territories of active battles. That's why local self-government just cannot operate there. And generally, despite some specific centralization trends, most decentralization achievements in Ukraine remain intact till today. So not everything is bad after decentralization. So most of achievements are really inactive today. But some decentralization trends, of course, take place. I'll maybe stop here slightly more, not too much, but slightly more, because it's of interest, of your interest, first of all, because it's about separation of powers. So what kind of trends can be observed here? First of all, that these local military state administrations, which are considered as temporary public bodies, they can be established without clear criteria. So the only criteria is incapability of local self-government to perform its functions. But it's very blurred criteria, actually. And that's why, in some cases, they are established with political aim. Yeah, so. And also, there are effects of several removal from offices of disloyal mayors in big cities. For instance, Chernivtsi case, then Rivne case, and some other cities when disloyal mayors to the central government were just removed under very debatable grounds. Also, the military income tax revenue was withdrawn from local budgets. What does it mean? Military income tax, it means income tax of soldiers. Because it actually gave a lot of money to the communities. They have quite good salaries now. And some communities used this opportunity in good way, using the money they receive for defense issues or supporting refugees or EDPs. And some got crazy, really, and started grant, not recovery works, but repair works in their communities, which were not so much necessary. And that's why state decided at some point to take this military income tax and to take it totally to the state budget and use for military purposes. But there are questions whether it does it in a proper manner. Also, there were some efforts to centralize control over recovery resources and processes. And one more interesting initiative, which undermines local self-government actually, is that local council members received a ban on travel abroad, by the way, not by law, but by the Cabinet of Ministers decision. And it actually led to the fact that they started resigning their mandates, because it even refers to women, so they cannot travel anywhere, go anywhere. And they said, I don't need this mandate. I don't want to be a local council member. And it became a problem, a real problem for the country. Corruption, our favorite topic in Ukraine. Yeah. Unfortunately, I will state only here, I will do here only one statement. Ukraine is still a highly corrupted country, even during war. Unfortunately. There is a lot of evidence for this, a lot of new cases around top officials, including the head of the Supreme Court of the country, who was caught on bribery. So what should we discuss later? A lot of new opportunities in regard of mobilization and wartime issues. And here in this photo, you see one of these cases, actually a very famous one. I do not know whether it was in your media, but this guy is the husband of Tetiana Krupa, who used to be the head of commission in Chernivtsi, somewhere at the regional level. But this commission takes very important decisions on invalidity. So this is medical commission which decides, are you a person with disabilities or you're not? And they were caught, so he lies here $5 million, which they kept at home. And you can imagine the scale of corruption if it is medium level, very, very medium level official, actually. Taking very important decisions during wartime, allowing people not to serve in the army. $5 million and a lot of different other currencies as well, in cash at home. Yes, and this is a very big question. And finally, I'm coming to last slides. Critical issues with the rule of law. So it was an issue for Ukraine before the full-scale invasion, and one of the most difficult topics, actually, and most pressing issues. But during war, I can state that the situation worsened significantly, and I listed several probably most problematic war-related areas where we can observe a lot of examples how the principle of rule of law is breaking. But it is a very big problem for the country, which actually undermines loyalty of citizens to the state authorities and thus undermines societal resilience. And finally, growing contradictions between the state, army, and society. And here are only some aspects of this, but unfortunately, due to many factors, in Ukraine we have some kind of two words, civilian world, especially somewhere very far from the front line, and military world. And these words live their different lives. Yeah, so for instance, in the Transcarpathian region, there is even no curfew. Yeah, so you can walk at night, go to the club, and it actually makes people, people living in these very remote areas, they are not very often engaged in the war at all. And they have like feeling it somewhere very far, and this critically undermines societal resilience, critically. Also, very important issue, no clear perspective of the demobilization of those currently in the army, and of course, people who serve for 3 years, they are tired, yeah, and they need to be replaced. But mobilization fails, and as long as the war continues, it fails even more, yeah, for many reasons. I cannot go into all of them, maybe in discussion. So as a result, we have growing tension between army and the state, growing tension between army and civilians, and growing tension, so a kind of triangle, and growing tension between civilians and state as well, including because of these problems with the rule of law, including the corruption, because people see more and more corruption cases, and at the same time they continue donating. And of course, it contributes to growing tension. And a very alarming thing, the last point, a trend of mass return to occupied territories is being recorded. I cannot talk about numbers, so there was one member of parliament who said that 150,000 people returned to occupied territories, voluntary, because they couldn't adapt, couldn't find opportunities, and this is very alarming for me. But then he said that this number is not true. I was mistaken, so no one knows the number, but even the Ukrainian ombudsman raised this issue that this return take mass forms, and this is a very big problem. So finally, a few conclusions. So Ukrainian societal resilience is deeply rooted in social relations and aspects of national mentality, fostering strong adaptability, self-organization, and enabling decentralized responses to wartime challenges. Amid the war, Ukraine political regime retains its patronal nature and even shows the tendency towards authoritarian bureaucratic phase, if referring to Alexander Fisun. At the same time, almost all core democratic institutions remain quite operational, except elections. There are no clear signs of democratic consolidation or movement towards liberal democracy, and this actually creates certain limitation on Ukraine's resilience, while the asymmetric nature of the war necessitates systemic political transformations towards regional bureaucratic governance under liberal democracy model. Now, of course, three key issues here are corruption, incompetent governments, and institutional inefficiency. Thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Oleksii. Really, you have been walking us through data from society up to constitutionally relevant schemes, and showing what is possible and what can be defined as still democratic features within wartime and what is actually missing. And obviously this is one of the key issues in democracy, voting, and we might then also go into this issue, and you might explain why it is not possible and when it might be possible again. But I turn to the audience, to the floor. There is 20 or so minutes to enter into discussion with Oleksii. He's open to any question. Thank you in advance, and we'll pass around the microphones.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. We had a talk a bit on such issues during our winter course, so it is fascinating to read it on your slide and hear it from you. In a way, Ukrainian war is a testament of Ukrainian societal resistance. But there are potential threats of societal resistance too. Let's talk about that and address that. A societal resistance, if it doesn't encompasses into organizational resistance, it can create chaos, and some of those signs are already visible in in current Ukraine and what I see in the post-war Ukraine, there are already segments within Ukraine on the income disparity. There are even high, as you have highlighted on your slides as well, there are also evidences of humongous amount of corruption, unimaginable as you have referred to. So my question to you is that whereas we have seen societies and social resistance operating into or transforming into political organizational resistance and society-based organizational resistance, what do you think? What are the problems in Ukraine, in society as well as in polity, that Ukrainian societal resistance, which is fascinating in itself, is not transforming into a political organizational resistance as well as society organizational resistance? Thank you.
Okay. Let me start from probably the most pressing topic, because it's fundamental generally for further future of Ukraine, which actually concerns me the most, is demographic situation. Because of war, it can be described as a catastrophe, a demographic catastrophe, because 7 million people have already left the country, and if the war continues even more, they will take roots here in Europe, wherever they are, and there will be less and less chances that they return. At the same time, they can facilitate that several more millions of their relatives come here as well. Yeah? And generally, given the balance between the generations in Ukraine, it's a catastrophe because the number of older people will be even more than those who work. And Ukraine critically will need, so generally most of experts now have the idea that Ukraine will not, unfortunately, manage this without immigration. But it's fundamental thing, not about transforming into political organization, but it can have impact on transforming into political organization too. So how do I see this process that people from the army, so some successful commanders of different levels, successful volunteers, some other leaders of civil society, they should establish political parties and go for election. This is probably the most democratic way to take the power and implement some changes in the country. But very important thing is that all previous attempts usually were not successful, but first of all, because of this oligarchic system, because oligarchs managed to take leadership in establishing these parties, to finance them, and make them the implementers of their interests and their will. Yeah? So very important is that if Ukrainian civil society manages to find resources for such parties outside of oligarchic impact in the society, how they do with support of the army, crowdsourcing, their own culture has been raised already, but no one tried in Ukraine actually to finance party by people's donations. Yeah? The other dimension is, of course, building capacity of civil society institutions. Actually, civil society is the agent which, for many years, saves this country. So I hope that this development of civil society and that active people now during war will unite into organizations and will not only seek how to support armies, but also how to force finally the state to finance it properly. Yeah? Perhaps there are no other solutions. So control, on the other hand, organization to take control over the governance and keep control. The other, it's just a move to the authorities through political parties and elections.
Well, thank you so much, Oleksii, for your insights and your presentation. You even managed to have some moments of humor, so which is certainly not easy in view of the news of the last days. I have several questions, but I would start with one, which is also about the oligarchic system. Because that is, of course, inherently linked also with Zelensky. He campaigned on this platform. It's also, of course, goes back to his TV persona as well. And anti-corruption efforts are, of course, also linked with the oligarchic system. And if I understood correctly, you said two things in that regard. You said that there was some legislation, but the impact is still unclear and uncertain. And the second thing was that you said that there were also some positive effect, actually, from oligarchic participation, financial support of the military, so some bad oligarchs and some good oligarchs. And I was a bit puzzled by that because, of course, from a structural perspective, whether just one or two good oligarchs can, let's say, make up for all the negative effects that the oligarchy has in terms of preventing democratization, in terms of their influence that they have on media, influence that they have on parties. You said that now in your answer to the previous question as well. That is, of course, nothing that is specific to Ukraine. I mean, think about Elon Musk's super PAC, for example. Think of X. So also in other countries, you have these impacts on parties and media. But I would be interested in how you see the role of oligarchy. Isn't it really a prerequisite for true democratization to overcome this system of oligarchy?
Mm-hmm. Regarding legislation, so yes, there was some legislation adopted, so there was so-called, I do not remember how it is titled officially, but it was named anti-oligarchic law, yeah, among people, among journalists, and it was adopted before the war with terminated enforcement. And it came into force during the war, actually, and started to be implemented. But from the very beginning, it was very debatable law, whether it generally is able to change something, because it actually establishes criteria for being oligarch and considered to be oligarch. And when this or those person has the number, so it is in line with some criteria, not all of them, but most of them, then he's put to so-called register of oligarchs, and is under more accurate control, yeah, from the state. So from the very beginning, me personally, I didn't believe in the efficiency of this legislation in any manner, because it looks quite decorative. During war, there was also adopted the law on lobbying, which was actually the requirement of European Union institutions. But it's hard to assess how it works now, because it was adopted not so long ago. But generally, expectations are not optimistic, yeah, that it will help here. So for me, probably the best precondition for this is that they're becoming poor. Oligarchs are becoming poor, because let's take Akhmetov. He lost the biggest enterprises in Mariupol and some other cities. He actually decided, so he sold all his media empire, and his explanation was that I do not want to be in the register of oligarchs, so I get rid of one of the assets which makes me, so of one of the criteria, actually. But I think it's not true. I think he cannot support it anymore to finance, because media business never was business in Ukraine. It was always a political tool. and it never gave too much money, yeah, so it usually received required finances from other sources. I think that somehow situations that they are getting poorer should be used here. Good that some kind of pressure and prosecution has started towards some oligarchs, but the question is that it is selective. So because Poroshenko, for instance, since today is under sanctions in Ukraine, but he is one of the opposition leaders. I would accept this because I think he is, there are some sins with him. But what about others? So when it is done selectively, then it looks like political pressure. Yeah, when it is not, because we have no questions, okay, we have questions to Zhivago, he is under sanctions, we have questions to some others. Why do we have questions to Boyko, to Akhmetov, yeah, who now is actively supporting army? So this system cannot be destroyed probably using this selective approach. I don't know, maybe when the revolution of dignity happened in Ukraine, I was expecting that oligarchs finally realized that the model of their business doesn't work anymore, actually. But they didn't. They continued parasiting on the state. I expected that there would be some kind of soft solution, some kind of new social agreement, first of all, among oligarchs, that we need to stop this redistribution of property and so on, to seek for investment. Maybe they will realize something after the war, I don't know. But I think that the state should use this situation to maybe to nationalize some assets. It can be a solution. But the question is what will be with them next? So should there appear new oligarchs who will get them, or there will be open procedures where any type of business can come? But for instance, I fully support the initiative when gas and electricity networks were taken from Firtash, because they nationalized during war as strategic asset. I think the state should do this, actually, but not selectively. That's the issue.
So it is a very hypothetical question, okay? Just curious to know about it. Suppose that Ukraine war ends today, and from tomorrow you are given a chance to build Ukraine altogether. What will be the first thing that you will do to avert such kind of situation in future? Whatever comes to your mind, first thing.
You mean to prevent the following wars like this? To build the army. I will build the army, invest in army. Yeah, so big army, big, well-equipped army is the best defense, actually. The best guarantee is that war will never happen with you.
But you don't have money enough to build an army. You are already devastated. You don't have enough money to build an army altogether. You are already devastated because of such economic problems.
Then we should look for money. You ask for solutions. The solution is like this, because there are no other solutions. Sorry, I even cannot believe now in NATO. So I live now in Estonia as a country which neighbors to Russia and will be attacked the first if Russia decides to attack NATO. In Estonia, generally, no one expects for NATO. They are buying weaponry. They didn't have air defense, they never bought air defense. They're buying weaponry. They're a small country with 1,300,000 inhabitants. But they understand that NATO is not a guarantee here. So you can only rely on yourself and maybe on some dedicated and really reliable partners. Yeah. Yes, I will not rely on NATO in this regard. So I would rely only on own army. There are no other solutions, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I also want to answer your question, donate to Ukrainian army. Well, that's kind of short. My name is Yara. I'm from Ukraine as well, so that's why I look at the presentation from maybe different perspective. But I would like to make some comments, if possible, that will lead into questions. First, it's about political parties. So basically in Ukraine, it's easier to create political party than to eliminate it. That's why we have like 300 political parties, of which how many represented in parliament? I think,
5.
like 5, yeah. Well, and I just wanted to tell you, it's a bit like concerns topic of election, which somebody should brought because it's the hot one, right? So the nature of my work requires travel to frontline territories. And I went to a small town, which is called Kamyanske. It's a small industrial town in southern east of Ukraine, Dnipropetrovsk region. And I saw a lot of big boards with political advertisement. They were new. They were, like, it was in December 2024. And so it's some like local party in Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think to register political party, there is no like different procedure, whether it's national.
Yes, there are no regional political parties in Ukraine, only national ones can exist.
Yeah, but basically
in fact, they are, so they focus on one region, but from law point of view, they are all Ukrainian, no other options.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of registration, they're all equal. And there was advertisement of, let's call it regional political party, which were targeted at people who work on, like, in this heavy industry city, about, I don't know, raising their pays and everything. So it brought me to the thought that people are kind of like thirsty for election, right? But it doesn't mean that I support election in Ukraine during the wartime. So it was just an example that I wanted to share with you, that like we understand that election is needed, but we also understand that it's very dangerous and it wouldn't be representative because of IDPs and refugees. But my question is that you said you think that new political parties should be created from people who comes from civil society, but also from like military people, right? Isn't it like, wouldn't it create kind of military dictatorship if the political party will be formed from, I don't think that political party can be formed with like current military personnel. I don't know if it's somehow regulated in legislation, but well, yeah, I'm afraid, wouldn't it look like this? And actually, I heard a lot of people saying that, oh, maybe after the war ends, Ukraine should be military dictatorship for some time, to which I do not agree. So yeah, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that topic.
Interesting thing is that during war, Ukraine received the highest support of democratic governance, by the way, in its history. By the way, during this wartime public opinion polls, one of the options was military dictatorship, which never was asked previously. And actually, not so many people who support this option. So military people going to the politics are not necessarily leading to dictatorship. Yeah? So we have in the history different examples, both when talented military commanders became dictators and became good democratic leaders, efficient democratic leaders. So It's current military people, so current officers, they cannot candidate until they are on service. So and it is one of the issues why it's hard to conduct it during hostilities and during martial law, yeah, because there is millions of people who deserve to candidate, but they cannot because they are in the army. If we take them from the army, we lose the army, yeah, in the country as a result. But anyway, they deserve to have at least the chance to candidate. So I can't say it will necessarily lead to, it depends on personalities. I can't say it will be definitely a solution leading to prosperity. Yeah, so that military people will be elected and will prosper. It doesn't work like this. Yeah, we had this story with Maidan activists, yeah, after the revolution. Nothing good, yeah, of it. There was such, like this Kozak Gavriluk, yes, this guy, who was probably one of the most inefficient members of parliament, elected occasionally, absolutely, just before he became famous in media, yeah, during this, of course, not good situation, yeah, with him. So, Ukrainians know that the figure #1 discussed now and the only figure who defeats Zelensky, according to public opinion polls, is General Zaluzhny. Yeah? So former commander-in-chief, who is now the ambassador in the UK. But once again, Ukrainians need to believe, and they start to believe that if Zaluzhny comes, everything will change. Yeah? But it doesn't work like this. So changes, Ukraine requires systemic changes. And these systemic changes, they happen at different level and they are not dependent on one person. Yeah, yeah. The factor of leadership is important, but I think that military commanders, there are a lot of talented military commanders who demonstrated their high capacities, very good human features, and they deserve at least a candidate. Yeah, and then the people should decide. But I'm not sure there will be parties established by militaries only. Yeah, probably it will not work in Ukrainian society, which wants democracy, actually, according to public opinion polls. So probably it will not work. But some figures, I'm afraid of another scenario, that oligarchs and some important now political players, they will just engage media figures from the army in their projects, and they will just disappear them at some point. And we will receive new oligarchic parties with new faces. Well, for me, this is the risk, actually. But it, first of all, depends whether these parties could manage new parties or maybe both parties, because we know that in Ukraine it's popular. We have this 300 parties plus, because it was also a business. People were creating parties. It's a long process, and then selling them to someone for good money during elections. And you could just take it, put another brand, and that's it. By the way, it's now the only option to establish a party, because you can't do a new one, unfortunately. Probably the issue is whether they manage to accumulate resources for good campaign. Because otherwise, the only source of their resources are oligarchs. They will buy them.
Are there any more questions or comments?
If nobody wants, then the floor is mine. Yeah, I wanted to ask about political parties and elections once again. So I suppose that it will take not one electoral cycle for Ukraine to become systematic? Because I agree with you that systematic approach is required, but how do you think? Well, I have a feeling that on the first post-war elections, people will just vote for, well, any populist, actually, as they kind of did before, right? And because they are, as I said, thirsty for change. So how do you see, is there any like mechanism to prevent this or not, or should it be prevented so that we can start on a right foot just after, I don't know, war ends? And yeah, is it possible? Like, I don't think it is, but maybe considering societal resilience and cohesion that we talked about here, maybe there is some way.
Probably there are no mechanisms to prevent populism, yeah, because even more developed democracies demonstrate now that they cannot prevent it. This is people's choice, yeah, so yeah, I share totally your concern about populists. I have read just a few days ago that during the next elections there will win the candidate who will promise to finish the war quickly, to put all corruptioners to the prison, and to ensure, to make the life of everyone better. And ask, have you heard about this? Yes, we heard 5 years ago. This person is the president of Ukraine now, yeah, with the relevant messages, yeah, but it's the same situation largely. So yes, the risk of support of populists is high anyway. It's probably normal for post-crisis period. Let's say not normal, usual thing. But we do not have prevention mechanism. Yeah? It's people's choices, how democracy actually works. So if the nation chooses suicide, who we are to stop them? Yeah. You can change the nation, change, yeah, just move to another, because I have heard from some people in Ukraine that, okay, I will wait for one more elections, but if they do not work, I just leave the country. Because I cannot fight for good life here anymore. Yeah, there are such people as well, but I do not see any mechanism.
Great. Yeah, that's obviously true. Democracy can just defend itself by actually choosing the channel it can choose, but this obviously can also go in the other direction. And this is, I mean, we could start another discussion and we do not, but this has been theorized obviously by many scholars, among all one that is famously also quoted, especially in European academia, is Böckenförde with the dictum that actually democracy can just try to defend itself, and it's up to the people to decide which kind of democracy it is and what the quality of democracy is in the end. For us, it has been a real pleasure to have you here. We thank you very much for all the insights, for walking us through really also some humor phases, and we hope that Ukrainian society is resilient and can actually then also make use of the rationality within having also a very big social relation and network. Thank you so much, Oleksii. Thank you so much for all you participating and coming to this event, and see you at the next occasion at Eurac Research or online. Thank you so much.